Hey, folks, we want to let you know that we're going to start reading emails from you, our listeners. And so if you want to email us and you want to tell us about what is exciting you about this podcast, things you're learning, stories of your own life that you're having conversations with people about masks, you can email us at TOTMPOD100. That's TOTMPod100 at gmail.com. We look forward to seeing your emails and we look forward to reading them here on the show. Thank you so much, folks.
Lately, I've been learning martial arts, and we see a lot of the fighting. But if you actually look at some of the famous martial artists, they're also well known for their healing abilities. So a complete system is martial arts and healing arts, right? The yin and the yang. We can't only just be fighting. We're gonna get hurt. We gotta also be healing, know how to heal, right? And so I feel this is part of the healing arts that we need to have in our arsenal.
Welcome to Taking Off the Mask podcast. My name is Ashanti Branch, and I'm really glad you joined us. Today's guest is Justin Zhu. Justin is the director and co-founder of Stand with Asian Americans. I learned about Justin's work during the pandemic while we were trying to find engaging activities for our youth and for our families, even though there was lots of places that were on lockdown. But when Shang-Chi, the film, came out, they put on a free screening for young people, for community. And we brought a few of our young men and some families to one of the screenings. And man, not only was it an amazing film, if you have not seen the Marvel film Shang-Chi, I definitely encourage you to see it. There's no commercial here, but I really enjoyed it and our young people enjoyed it. Justin has been doing a lot of work to really build awareness around supporting Asian Americans. And really, I'm excited. He's also a former CEO, so he has his tech side of his life and his understanding. But as he is now in the social sector, really helping to create change, this conversation was rooted in that. I think deeper meaning around our lives are what is behind this emotional mask. And I'm really excited with this conversation. We talked about martial arts and healing arts. We talk about yin, yang. We talk about lots of topics that are around how we show up as our most full self. And so if you haven't yet made a mask, I invite you to go make a mask today at millionmask.org. Justin and I, we share our masks publicly, but you can do it anonymously until you're ready to find those people in your circle, in your corner who you can talk to. In these conversations that we attempt to have with men from all backgrounds, from around the world, we hope that we begin to normalize that we, in these bodies that we're born in, feel all the human emotions that exist. And maybe we've been trained or taught or has been trained out of us or nurtured out of us that we don't get to feel certain things. And so I hope that you enjoy today's conversation. I hope that you hear the heart of two men coming together just to really dialogue and learn about each other. And I hope that you will find somebody in your life that you can take off that emotional mask with and know that you're not alone. That there's more to you than anybody can see by looking at you. There's more to me. And every time we get to find a new person that we get to connect with, hopefully on a more deeper level than just the superficial ones, I think we begin to build a deeper network of a community where we understand each other a little bit more. So thank you for being a part of this work with us. Thank you for being a part of the Million Mask Movement. And we look forward to you being a part of the next chapter of this work. Please tell somebody about it. If you like this podcast, please share it, like it, subscribe to it, be a part of this movement with us. I hope that these conversations are enriching you and the lives of people in your life. Thank you so much for being a part of it today. And for those of you who are new to the show, the Million Mask Movement and the Ever Forward Club are really in a season of growth. And so we have a big event, a virtual 5K coming up at the end of May. So I guess you can call it one of our non-sponsor sponsor. So if you are able to hike, walk, bike, scoot, run, swim, any other mode of moving around, however you move around in the world, we invite you to be a part of this 5K, 3.11 miles. You can sign up on our website. There'll be a link somewhere in the bottom. And if you want to support this podcast, there'll be a link at the bottom of the show notes so you can support us here. Thank you so much, folks. Hope you enjoyed today's episode with Justin Zhu. Take care. Bye now. Justin Zhu, welcome to the Taking Out the Mask podcast. It is so glad to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Ashanti. Glad we can make the time.
Well, we've been in communication for like the last 20 minutes, but we've just finally got to start recording because we know technology loves its drama,
Yes. We any way we want to make it happen, it got it. So
we're going to make it happen. I appreciate you for your patience. And sometimes I try and be like, I don't need to tell people that we had tech issues. They will never know. And also I want people to know that even as much as we possibly can, we try and just be as transparent as possible. And sometimes there's behind the scenes stuff that as much as we try and make it perfect in the production, post-production, before it was sometimes a challenge, and that's part of life too, right? So
very, very on theme with the other side of the mask.
Man, for real. I was debating whether I was going to say something, and I was like, somebody's going to know. So in my mind, I'm going to try and be first, right? So look, how about you introduce yourself, tell folks what you want them to know about you. You and I have had a couple of times that we got to meet in person, but I am super excited about this conversation. And introduce yourself, and then we'll jump into the masks.
Yeah. So my name is Justin Zhu. I grew up first 8 years in Shanghai in China, and immigrated with my parents to Canada, then to the States, where I reside now in San Francisco. I started my career in engineering as a software engineer at Twitter in the early days. Then left that and did my own technology company, where I was the co-founder and CEO for 8 years. And for the past 2 years, I've been full-time volunteering as the executive director of Stand with Asian Americans. And really, it's a transition into being an activist for Asian Americans, and in response to the rise in anti-Asian hate in the past couple of years, many Asian Americans have been speaking up, and I've been grateful to be part of that role.
Yeah. And someone introduced us, someone who knew that I work with youth, introduced us. You were doing a screening of the Marvel character,
Shang-Chi.
Shang-Chi, I was going to pronounce it wrong. Right. Yeah. Yes. And so some of our young men got to come in their families, and then we got a chance to really start connecting after that. And so I really thank you for the work that you're doing. And I'm excited, that we get to have this kind of conversation. I mean, we talked a lot of the surface stuff and business stuff and nonprofit stuff. And now we get a chance to kind of go a little deeper. And I think, in one of our first meetings over, in downtown, we had an opportunity to really connect in a lot of ways, and I really appreciate you. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me and creating the space.
So you as a guest get to decide who goes first. Either you go first or I go first, but whatever you choose is fine. And then we'll jump into the masks.
Sure. Why don't you go first so I can show mine after. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. So I'll do the front, and then you can share your front, and then I'll do the back. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So today my creation is this. This is what I drew. And the 3 words I wrote for the front are excited, passionate, and serious. I don't even know if I spelled passionate right, but I am when I think about these 3 right here, and I think when I was thinking about I'm going to write caring, because I've been writing caring lately, but I think I'm really excited about where we are. There's a lot of, stand with the front, where I try and keep in portraying the front is what's happening on the outside. I'm really excited about where we are in this organization and growth. And personally, I feel excited. I'm very passionate about not only this work around masks, around men, around young men, around communities, around all people, recognizing that they're not alone, that there's more to us. And I think, and I'm also really serious. And I think sometimes when you're excited, you're passionate, and you're serious, sometimes it's hard to be like, hey, because some of the things that I'm passionate about are not always pleasant things. I'm passionate about helping young people not feel alone. I'm passionate about trying to stop this level of violence that is happening against our communities and in schools. So when that passion and seriousness comes out and excitement, it can almost seem like I'm angry all the time. And I think there's some anger behind it if I think about it, but it's not anger for the sake of harming. It's an anger at what we have created and what our society is making people to seem as normal around the wellness and well-being of each other. And so that's why this character doesn't even, I don't even have any inflection of a smile on it, and it's not mad. It's really just intensity, right? And passion. And sometimes I know that I'm also trying to disarm people. So I'm always putting on a smile in order to disarm, that I have this size and I have all these locks, right? And I have all of this stuff that is sometimes like feeling like I'm like people can misread it, right? Yeah, I think when I was a teacher, I think in my surveys at the end of the year, students would be like, "He's so mean." Like, what? I am not mean. What are you talking about? But I think that because I care about your education and because I want you to be successful and because I want these things for you, it comes out in this intense way sometimes that could be seen as anger, but it's not coming from an anger place. And so how do I translate that in either words or deeds that let it get received in the right way? So that's what the front of the mask looks like today. Yeah.
All right. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. Thank you.
So shall I go next, show my front, and then we'll do the backs?
Yeah, that'd be great.
All right. So here's my mask. Oh, let me, see that.
Yep.
All right. So it says compassionate, competent, and courageous. So this is the mask I put on. I think there's many qualities. I think that gets into that. I think part of my work as an activist, as an executive director, is really to hear a lot of issues and troubles that face our community. And so, when you hear, like you're mentioning, violence and just injustices all the time, as part of that compassionate mask, also putting on the courage that, hey, there's hope. We need to, we'll come together and figure something out. At the same time, because these issues seem very insurmountable, I try to present really a sense of competency that, hey, something can be done. I also think that competency part, there is a bit of also just being an immigrant, being Asian American, in the sense that we are expected to do well, and I think for Asian Americans, there's a lot of the sense of hard work is like kind of our core survival mechanism. Without that, there's just sort of not many paths for us. So I think when we're seen as incompetent or maybe having an off day, it really kind of eats at our sense of self. And so I think, I think for me, whether it's being an engineer, whether it's being a founder of a company or now executive director of a nonprofit, these are all the things I've done for the first time that, I've no background in. None of my family has, been, or in activism in particular. So it's really just learning on the job. And, but there's a lot behind that mask, I'm sure we'll talk about, but, I'm kind of like you were saying too, a lot of behind that too is the sense of anger and frustration, right? That kind of fuels some of the work. And, I think I really appreciate conversations like this, Ashanti, because it really kind of helps us, process and giving us some space for taking care of our mental health right? Taking care of our own feelings, especially as men. I think we don't often talk about and have spaces for sharing feelings. But when you're going through year after year and lifetimes, really, from your families of injustices and not feeling that there's much change, it could be pretty harmful. And so I'm glad we can share in this space and hopefully help each other find some solutions.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that. And I think in addition to that, thank you for those words. I hope it will normalize that we have probably more in common than what we think, because oftentimes we decide on our commonality by what we see.
Mm.
And our eyes can only pick up so many we can pick up the differences pretty quickly out external. But if we don't go past what our eyes see, we could definitely miss people that could be not only good friends, confidants, like mastermind partners, like people who could like help us go to the next level of our own journey if we didn't let the eyes decide.
Absolutely.
I think that creates a lot of challenges too. Um, yeah, thank you, and hopefully, as we get to the back, we recognize, wow, like I've found that in many conversations with people, like I realize, oh, there's way more in common than anybody on this little screen would ever be able to see, right? Because I sometimes may do it too, right? You read the bio of someone, you're like, oh man, this person has done some amazing things. How can I compare to that, right? And recognizing that, well, that's still that's still the outer appearance. That's a LinkedIn profile. That's the external stuff, right?
Right.
But at the human level, this is where this back of the mask comes in sometimes. So, ready to go to the back?
Let's do it.
Okay. So, here are my words for today. Worry, growing pains, and then fear and doubt. Worry, growing pains, fear and doubt. And I was going to write fear, and then I was going to write doubt, and I was like, well, let me just put them together. I would say the one right now that I'm probably spending a lot of, I'm like, I feel like I'm talking about it a lot, but sometimes I feel like I'm talking about it too much, is sometimes the growing pains of the organization and the worry. So let's say over the last, let's say 3 weeks. If I just use 3 weeks as a bookend, in 3 weeks, like not only did we lose one of our team members, like unexpectedly, we also got a grant, which is one of our biggest grants ever, for $250,000.
Wow.
Now, like and one of the challenges in the growing pains is that I am talking about this work all the time about how do we be more our authentic self. And when I had the challenge that showed up earlier, in the earlier part of this 3-week period, I was like feeling it, and I was like, what am I going to do? Oh my goodness, what am I going to do? And I didn't want to make a post about it. Like, I didn't want to like share it. I mean, I shared it with some leaders, and I shared it with my coach, because I was like, oh crap, like what the frick am I going to do? And then, but I know that ultimately I have to keep going, because I'm a leader, and I'm supposed to be leading. And there's one thing the leader doesn't get usually permission to do, is to be wallowing in the problems. Your job is to be like, okay, and definitely every movie you see, right? A leader hits a problem and they just be like, calculate, like 3 seconds later, okay, here's what we're gonna do. And you're like, what the heck? Like, how in the world, right? And I'm sitting here like wanting to like have a tantrum. If I'm being honest, I wanted to like, I want to like break something, throw something. I want to like scream. I want to cry. But I'm trying to like be a leader, right? So I got to be like, oh, I got this. We're gonna figure this out. We're gonna make it work. And I'm watching myself. I'm just like metacognitive, right? I'm like, Ashanti, you are faking it so bad. And how long can you fake this before it explodes and it comes out in the wrong way? Because it's coming out. It's going to come out, right? And it was more of a moment of, oh, this hurts. This hurts. Like, and I think I was not giving myself permission to feel the hurt, because I was intellectualizing that this is what happens. And I've read a lot of books about leaders and about, professionals and people who have done high level things in the world, and they
Yeah.
all talk about some of the problems, and you're like, okay, it's just it's part of the test, right? I mean, as a spiritual person who believes in a higher power, like, hey, this is a test. How bad do you want this goal? And so I can
Mm,
intellectualize why it's happening. And so I over intellectualized it so that I didn't let myself feel it. And one of
mm,
my mentors was like, Ashanti, yeah, you're smart. I know all that. But let's slow down a second. Because you're saying all the right words, but like, have you given yourself permission to feel the human part of what you feel? And
mm,
the answer was no. And I think, and he just said, I invite you to take some time to let yourself feel what you feel, because it's going to come out some way that you may not prepare for if you're not careful, right? And I realized, yeah, I was already starting to eat eat stuff, my favorite foods that are not good for
mm,
me, but I love them, and they
mm,
provide a sense of comfort.
mm,
And I realized, oh yeah, I'm soothing,
mm,
and I think that that's one of the things that I've been carrying a lot. And then we got this grant. And so I got this grant, and I was like ready to
yeah.
I was ready to post about the grant, right? And then I was like, I was having this internal dialogue. How dare you come out and post about this grant, and then you don't even share the bumps? Because like,
Mm,
the idea is that if you're not careful, you do what you're telling people not to be doing. All I do is talk about the positive,
right.
because talking about the negative is so hard.
Mm,
And I'm not trying to be a hypocrite. I just know that it's hard to do, right? It's hard to do. So those are the things that I've been dealing with behind the scenes, um
mm,
and also just trying to be really honest about the challenge that it is to talk about the hard stuff. It's hard. I mean,
mm.
I can talk about it behind the scenes, but I don't want to go out publicly and tell the hard stuff. And I think I'm trying to normalize that too. I do it in these conversations,
Yeah.
but I don't always do it where in the places where I think that it should be. And I'm working through that too as a person in this work. So I
Mm,
think I'll stop there. But that's the one that's got me in a little spin cycle right
yeah.
now. The growing pains of trying to grow an organization, trying to do big things, and yeah.
It's tough. It's real work and leadership. So I totally get it. And I think we really prioritize the positive, right? Like kind of the success and Instagram and LinkedIn. We're showing the best, but the reality is that there is the sun. There's also the moon. There's light. There's darkness, and not one is better than the other.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so one thing I think from my background as an Asian American is and this a core to Asian philosophy is the yin and the yang, right? You've seen that kind of circle, right?
Mm.
And one side is positive, one side is negative, just like two sides of a battery. But
Mm.
there's not the view that, oh, the positive is good, the negative is bad, right? You need to have both to have the polarity, to actually have the battery work. If you only
Mm.
had positive, imagine you only had sun 24/7, or you
Mm.
only had darkness 24/7. What would happen? Right? We would all die. Life would be destroyed. You need to have this balance, and it can ebb and flow. So I think our society in the West, in particular, we're really pushing, really kind of put on this facade, right? That everything is great. Nothing the West does is every bad, right? We kind of cover up the negatives, right? I think a lot
Yeah.
of our work and social justice is to be able to talk about some of the unfortunate history of the
Yeah.
past and the present. But hey, this
Mm.
is not to say, hey, let's just criticize, right? Let's recognize
Mm.
these conditions that people live in, and let's do something about it, right? America is the richest country in the world, right? Yet the number one reason an American goes bankrupt is medical bills, not being able to pay for healthcare to survive, right? So, um, well, let me bring on my mask too. So the back of
Mm.
my mask is uncertain, stressed, and depressed. Let me put this. Yeah, you can see it here.
Mm.
So, kind of similar to you, there's really no playbook, especially for the type of work we're doing in the nonprofit world, activism. we're going up against big systems, right? That kind of perpetuate the conditions we live in, right?
Yeah.
So it's, in a sense, we're fighting against the empire. So there's a lot of uncertainty all the time. When I was doing my own startup in the technology field, there's a lot more playbooks and bounds, right? You build this technology, you sell it to these kind of customers, you hire this kind of people, and there is that playbook. But in a nonprofit, activism, civil rights work, right, there are few examples, right? And it just because something happened in the 60s doesn't mean we can replicate it now, right?
Yeah.
So there's just different paths. So there's a lot of uncertainty for me as a nonprofit leader, and people look to you and you're asked to speak on things, and there's a constant worry that am I saying things that represent the community? Am I saying things that are helpful for the cause? Am I saying things that are just inaccurate or just off base, right? So a lot of that, and related to all that work, stress for sure. I think I tend to mask stress well. You don't see it on my face, but it's like my heart's like beating, or my neck's all tense, my back is hurting, and I'm turning and tossing on my bed, right? And that gets into kind of the third quality that I hide sometimes, is like being the sense of like depression, the sense of like you're not wanting to get out of bed, or I'll sleep all day and still feel tired, and just kind of like, hey, how do I get out of it kind of sense, right? That like the problems, the demand seems so unsurmountable, and a lot of it, when I recognize that, and kind of when what you're saying as well, being kind of metacognitive, recognizing what's happening, I find my breath is just so shallow, right? And just not being able to breathe, right? And in this fight or flight mode.
Yeah.
Whereas when we're relaxed, we can breathe freely and it's smooth. And a nervous system is just, it's just more relaxed. So that's something I'm constantly working on. It's like how the more we do this work, as it becomes successful, right, you get more funding, people, the bigger the stress is as well, expectations placed on you, right? And I saw a really good documentary with you, Lisa Ling, right? You're on the mainstream, people looking, that's amazing, right? I'm sure that also comes with a lot of, responsibility on your shoulders, right? But necks are pretty tight, right? And so how do we kind of manage all that without, also burning out ourselves, right? Because you are this at the core of what you're trying to build, right? And if you're not there, or if you're not healthy, if you're not present, right, the movement suffers. And so, and you also set an example for others, right? If Ashanti can't do it, or if Justin can't do it, or and others may lose hope, right? So I think going back to really appreciate conversations like this, so that really we can relate, hey, this is part of the journey, and share ideas and how we could move forward. Because the other analogy I like to use, lately I've been learning martial arts, and we see a lot of the fighting, but if you actually look at some of the famous martial artists, they're also well known for their healing abilities. So a complete system is martial arts and healing arts, right? The yin and the yang. We can't only just be fighting. We're gonna get hurt. We gotta also be healing, know how to heal, right? And so I feel this is part of the healing arts that we need to have in our arsenal.
The martial arts and the healing arts. Hey, folks, I am reaching out to you right now to let you know that we are inviting all of our listeners to become supporters of this podcast. If you find these conversations valuable and meaningful, as we march towards 1 million masks. We know that it's more than just these conversations we need to have. It's more conversations in schools and in communities. And we're going to ask you to help that mission along. We're going to ask you to be a supporter. If you go to the bottom of the show notes, there'll be a link that says support this podcast. And we invite you to be a supporter. Figure out what area makes the most sense for you to support. And we look forward to you being a part of this movement as we make masks with people all over the world. But in these conversations, as we have conversations with men about their masks, from youth all the way to our elders in our community. So thank you for being a part of the podcast, and we'll see you soon. I think sometimes people, in my life, may have oversimplified the yin and the yang, right? The positive and negative. But I think almost even as you describe it, I think it's the yin and the yang, right? The way you just described it is they're part of the whole, right? I think kind of like somebody was talking about this once, but I was wondering, like, as we are like navigating the challenges, right, of running the organizations, right? If we're not careful, when you said there's no examples, I think the challenge is always, or maybe it's often, how do we talk about the problems without sounding like we're complaining? How do we talk about the problems without sounding like we're whining? Like all the word, even with those words that I described them as, right? It's often seen as if you're talking about the problem, you're not. I wonder how I'm thinking about this. You're taking your eyes off of the goal, but also you can get sucked in. I think that's what I've heard people when they try and describe that's the secret, right? Just think positive all the time. Think positive all the time. And I think that I grew up with that. Like my house, no matter what was going on, there ain't no complaining here. You should be glad that you got, no matter what you wanted to complain about, there was always the answer was, you should be glad you got this, right? Like, oh, you wondering why you got to eat plain cereal? You should be glad you got something to eat, right? It was almost like nothing was ever worth, or you never had room to learn how to navigate and speak about things that were not going well. So I think I got into a habit of like kind of always, err toward the positive. And I think that what I've seen with a lot of young people in our work, definitely young men who have found themselves in some tough situations, is that they have been, you get to a place where all the positive is gone, but all you're full of is negative because you didn't show it. You didn't talk about it. You didn't deal with it. And now what's about to pop out is the response to all the negative stuff that you didn't deal with, that needed to be dealt with. Hey, somebody betrayed you. Somebody hurt you. Somebody did something. Somebody said something. I dealt with it in a minor level, but now I've stored up all of this, whatever. It's all this next negative energy, and now it's coming out, and it's going to come out somewhere. And I think that we see this over and over again. And I really want this movement to be about helping people realize that there's so much more to us. So how do we have the yin and the yang? How do we have conversations about things that are going well and things that are challenging so that we continue to be in balance? But when we're off balance and all we talk about is the positive and we just store up the negative, people see it in their bodies, health effects. They see it in relationship challenges. I think it starts to come. I think it just has no choice but to come out energetically, right? Like it's energy and motion, emotions. Like, and it's just, you go, oh, I'm not going to deal with that one. Okay, we'll just wait over here in your heart. We'll wait over here in your heart. Oh, we're going to wait over here in your lungs. We're going to wait over here in your pancreas and your prostate and your all the places that stress stores up in our body. And what happens? I mean, our bodies can't handle all that. They're not designed to handle all that, I think, and which is something to be said about what we keep seeing in our health situations here, and not only here in the West, but even around the world too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's how do we transform the energy that we have, whether it is from pain, trauma, from anger, right? How do we channel that, right, to something that we can change the conditions that we're part of, or something constructive? And so something simple, just working out, is very helpful, right? To going for a run, and you met my puppy, my dog, my first ever dog, and I notice whenever he gets into like a scuffle with like another dog, or maybe he gets barked at, he would just shake it out, and then he'll be on his way and back into it, right? And I think a lot of us, we will just take it and just store it in our heart, in our belly, right, and in our necks, right, and we never just shake it out. We don't, like maybe go to a dance studio, right? Go run, right, or do some martial arts, right, and it's to bring that energy out so that you can then take in more, right? Take in more stress, right? And then be able to release it, right? But then you'll be able to channel that into, okay, I'm gonna channel it into lifting or into kind of this work that I think is going to be part of changing the conditions that got me, or my family into these scenarios. And I think part of it how it reflects what we're doing, right? Like there's frustrations and traumas that we faced, and we're doing something about it. In some ways, it is therapeutic for us, right, to do this work. At the same time, when it's overwhelming stress, right, like you're on the bench press and it's like 500 pounds, right? You're like, okay, it's gonna crush your lung. You're like, okay, this is too much, right? Yeah. But if you consistently be able to like put some of it and have a good path, and the thing is, like, there's few trainers of this, right? There's a lot more trainers who can teach you how to work out, but how do you train to go about your life, give you good advice that's not from this sort of dominant culture perspective, right? Of like a privileged person, right? Because like the sense of, hey, this American dream, if you just work hard, everything will work out. That doesn't apply to everybody, right? Or actually for a lot of people, it doesn't work that way, right? So when you start hitting these ceilings, hitting these bumps, and you're like, hey, this works for this other person who I read in this book, but who wrote this book, right? Most of it are from white people, right, who have privileges that we don't have, and in theory, it does work if there is not, all these systemic barriers for us, right? So unfortunately, what's happening as we go on these sort of, Andrew Carnegie, How to Make Friends Influence People, and with these books, we're going to run into bumps that Andrew Carnegie's not going to run into. Then we're like, okay, maybe we process and figure out, man, we might have to like change the system somehow, or you start, or at least, hating on the system, right? Oh, there's something kind of messed up, right? And so I think that's where we're at. I feel like that's kind of some of the work that we have to do, and for our communities too, just recognizing how much of what you're facing is because of just something that you might walk on the street and trip and fall, right? It's not necessarily anybody's fault, or like the system's fault. And then some of it could be because, hey, like your neighborhood is just like unsafe. There's roads aren't paved. Other neighborhoods aren't like that. There's systemic issues, right?
That's right. Deal with,
right? Then okay, so I think that could also help just parse out some of the frustrations, and but yeah, it's not easy, but I'm glad we're able to talk about it.
I think this may just needs to be like the part one, because I have lots of things that are coming up, and I want to explore them with you. I want to explore them with this idea of martial arts. I want to explore them with the idea of how you, when you talk about like you have a good way of like managing stress, where you master the stress really well. How when you think about yin yang, how do you handle the stress part? Like if you're able to keep it, if it doesn't show up on your face, then where do you deal with it? How do you deal with it? Right? Like if the goal is keeping balance, that means I felt it. I need to deal with it, because if I believe in having the balance, it's accepted and it's welcomed, right? But if you like you said, you mask the stress, and if it doesn't, you say you felt it in your heart, right? Whatever. But so where do you deal with it? If it doesn't, like, how do you deal with it? And maybe that's another episode or conversation, right? But that's something I'm processing today, like this idea of like, well, it needs to be dealt with if there's going to be balance. I can't be just happy all the time, right?
For sure. Yeah, I think especially too, just for man, we're always thinking about like force and being strong, right? There's not as much on like healing, be taking care of our heart, our bodies, right? but that's a complete system. In Asia, like healing is really part of just from eating the foods that we have. It's like medicine, right? We're looking at it. I think that's the case for indigenous cultures. So we're constantly looking for ways to heal, take care of our bodies, right? Because we know there's all these toxins out there, uh, um, so how do we constantly start recognizing our own needs? And in the West, like even the medicine is really about getting you addicted to something. It's maybe more of a treatment than a cure, right? The cures are hard to come by, and gets into, capitalism. And okay, if the pharmaceutical companies their goal is to a big part of it is to make more money, right? It's life-saving drugs that really don't cost anything, like insulin, right?
Yeah.
People are dying because they can't afford insulin in America.
Right.
I'm glad that's changing, right?
Yeah.
So our culture is so brutal, and so when that happens, it's hard not to feel angry and feel hopeless, right?
Yeah.
And feel, dejected. But I think that's where, what your work does, Ashanti, reaching out to youth, show, hey, there's hope, right? There's other paths, and I'm here for you. I really appreciate that when I saw, the youth that you brought to Shang-Chi, the movie, and we hosted this with the hope that many community members can come together. It was beautiful. We had, Black, brown, Asian, white, all sorts of people that reflects the community, in this theater, enjoying this superhero film, right? A person of color, the first Asian American superhero.
Yeah.
And, I think, and going forward, I think, now that we're seeing archetypes like Asian Americans, of course, we've seen Black heroes and like Black Panthers and others, like, hey, like the superhero team, it should be a lot more colorful. It's not just, one color. And I think when we can see that reflected, that does give us hope, right? Give us healing too, that, hey, we can overcome. We're not just victims, right? We're not just, and so, anyway, so I think there's many types of healing.
Yeah. I want maybe in our next conversation we can tap into this. And so first I want to just thank you for being here. Thank you for being willing to share your mask with us. Thanks for willing to be in this conversation. And I hope that, you and I are going to have another connection outside of this conversation on through these masks. But, our invitation is for people out there to make masks, right? To explore your own mask first and then find the people in your life that you can talk about it with, right? And I think that's something that I'm really passionate about and serious about. So how about this? Just so we can be mindful of the time, will you tell folks how they can find your organization if they want to support, if they want to get involved, or maybe you have some events coming up you want to share with folks, and then we'll get you out of here in this part of the conversation. I just wanted to really appreciate you and get you out on time because I want to respect your time. And so let folks know how, where they can find your organization, if you have a website or whatever, and we'll put that all in the show notes, but please tell them.
Yeah, you can find us at standwithasianamericans.com. We're also on Instagram at standwithasianamericans. We're also on Twitter and on LinkedIn. So if you search for our name, you should be able to find us. So we post a lot of news and empowering content about Asian Americans and civil rights. So be sure to follow us there.
Nice. And folks, Justin and I, we shared our mask publicly, but you don't have to share yours publicly yet. You can share it anonymously at millionmask.org. millionmask.org. Stay tuned for that and make a mask. And then maybe you find somebody in your life who you're willing to invite them to make a mask. And then maybe you all can discuss it. I think that will be the first way of being able to say, how can I start talking about my own mask? So Justin, thank you for being here on the Taking Off the Mask podcast. I so appreciate you. And I hope folks, you enjoyed this conversation with myself, Justin Zhu.
Appreciate you, brother.
The Taking Off the Mask podcast is produced by Ryan Louie. Graphics are by Kelly Wong. And a special thanks to the team at Ever Forward, Vanessa Cortez and Choque Allen Alvarez. We'd like to thank everyone who's been a part of the creation of this podcast as we cross the 100th episode milestone and begin the work to the next 100. We hope that everyone who's been a part knows that they're a part of the Taking Off the Mask family. And we look forward to you being a part of it as well. If you like what you heard today, please subscribe, write a 5-star review, and share, as we look forward to continuing to have conversations that matter. Stay tuned for the relaunch of the Million Mask Movement on 11/11/22. That's November 11th of 2022. There's a math problem in there. You can find out more by visiting everforwardclub.org and following us on social media. Take care, and we'll see you soon.